I think this is hugely important in the context of the development of Gibraltar's landmass and, of course, thereby Gibraltar's economic development for the next decade. We've got a project on the east side of Gibraltar, which is also, I hope, starting to take shape. We've got Hassan Centenary Terraces, affordable housing on that plot. And on the western side of Gibraltar, as part of our city, we're fast running out of space. And I think it's important that we're able to see development on the western side, on the side which is important for the continued growth of our city, but that we see that done in a sustainable way outside of the city walls, in a way that brings more greenery into our living space. And I'm very happy with the proposals that we've seen. The first stage is to create the reclamation itself, and we'll take the rubble mountain on the east side, which the residents of Catalan Bay hate seeing as much as I hate seeing, and that will become the reclamation on the western side. You'll see that very quickly, because that will also mean that we have the flat ground to build the affordable homes on the east side. The buildings on the plot will be subject to the full DPC process, and they will have to obtain consent from the DPC, as much as to heights as they will as to any other aspect of what is being done, the density, etc. And you say the reclamation itself is a government project, so that will of course go for guidance and advice. That is an EIA that will have to be finished in order to be able to do it in keeping with the rules, but we hope to see that moving very quickly.
So you won't be asking the DPC for permission?
Not to create land. I mean, let's be clear that the DPC has never been asked before by the government whether or not we should create land. We go through the process of ensuring that land is created in the proper way and in a way that is in keeping with environmental standards, which we apply to ourselves, and we would do that even if we had left the European Union last Friday. We would want to ensure that we create the reclamation in keeping with the highest environmental standards of the European Union. But it's not a planning issue. The planning is the question of what you put on the reclamation.
You mentioned the Eastside mound. Do you envisage it all going to the reclamation at Coaling Island?
So the Eastside rubble mountain, the Eastside mound, different people call it different things, all of them rightly pejorative. That will all go into the area of Coaling Island, and some of it, of course, as part of the work of levelling out the plot will now have become part of that plot itself, but not of what you see going up on the mound. That will all go into the reclamation at Coaling Island.
And do you expect the Eastside mound to be sufficient to fill in the whole reclamation?
There may be an area which will require additional infill, but you know that we've had a lot of infill received in that area from Lathbury as well, so a lot of that rock has been used for the purposes of moving down to Coaling Island.
What would you say to anybody who may be concerned about the volume of trucks needed to carry all the rubble at the east side over to Coaling Island?
Well, we haven't yet invented another way of dealing with it. I'd say to the people who are concerned about the trucks that I'm trying to deal with the concerns of the people who don't like the mound, myself included, and that we've got to do something with it. I mean, if we looked at all of the concerns that different people have and thought that the government hadn't already considered those issues, we would be saying that people outside of government have more concerns than the professionals inside government who are tasked and are professionals in advising the government on all of these issues.
The project's going to be financed using the £300 million that the government obtained in an arrangement in which it used government housing as security. The GST calls it a mortgage, you call it an investment.
This is the only thing they criticise me for.
You say it's not going to cost the taxpayer practically a penny, but you are going to have to put taxpayers' money up for it.
The way that we are financing this is that the developer has the obligation to create the reclamation for the government. The government has a share in the developer, a 20% share in the developer, but the developer needs to borrow in order to be able to create the reclamation. They need that to be financed. So what we've said, and if you look at our press release, we've said we're going to finance, not fund, finance the creation of the reclamation by the developer by using part of the £300 million investment in Gibraltar that we've obtained from institutional investors, some of them in Canada and elsewhere. The developer then repays the government of Gibraltar the money that we have lent to them to create the reclamation, which means that we invest part of the money, we get that money back with interest, and we get half of the reclamation back as well. We think this is an excellent deal for the taxpayer, and it also means that we are ensuring that we have space for expansion on the western side to boot. I think it's exactly the right way to structure this.
Until you get the money back, do you know what money is expected to go out from that £300 million?
Well, look, there is an estimation of what the reclamation is going to cost, and I'm not going to give you that figure because I know that the developer will need to ensure that it gets the best possible deal from its own contractors. If I told you exactly how much it's going to cost, the contractors would know how much they can charge the developer, and that would not be in anybody's commercial interest.
What was the process by which the government came to a commercial agreement with the developer?
Well, you may know that the former administration had granted, without tender, the Coaling Island site to a group of Gibraltarian developers. So we found ourselves with a situation of having to vacate the Coaling Island site to hand it over in keeping with the obligations that the former administration had entered into. We did not think that that was a good deal for the taxpayer. We thought we could do better, and therefore we looked at the possibility of reclaiming in front of Coaling Island. That, of course, caused concern to the developers who had Coaling Island because they then realized they would no longer have access to the seafront. Look, all of these things could have led to a dispute and litigation. Instead, they led to compromise, understanding, and partnership. And now what we're going to do is we're going to obtain a share of the Coaling Island site, in effect, for the government of Gibraltar as becoming part of the development. This is a model that was originally instigated by the AACR and then pursued by the GSLP at the time of the Queensway Quay development with Taylor Woodrow. And so we built all of that into this process, and we've arrived at a process where, or at a conclusion, where the original developer of Coaling Island is now partnering with the government and developing further, and new investors have been brought into the consortium in order to be able to finance and fund and then develop this much larger area in front of the Coaling Island plot.
And can you tell us who is part of this consortium?
Well, I think it's a matter of public record. I think they're all disclosed in the shareholding of the company that will be doing the development. So you've got people like Paul Butler, who is the owner of the head lease at Queensway Quay now and is well known to Gibraltarians as a restaurateur who established himself in Gibraltar some years ago, is a Gibraltarian now, and is an important investor. You've got people like the Ben Park Consortium, which have developed areas like Vineyards and King's Wharf and all of the others. In fact, the interest of the people at King's Wharf is to ensure that whatever is built there does not obstruct King's Wharf and some of the other areas, so the whole thing will be oriented sensitively. You've got the developers of Portland, and you've got the developers of NatWest and Midtown and Leon's Place all together in one consortium. So a proven track record of Gibraltarian developers and investors partnering with the government to deliver a truly Gibraltarian project subject to the control of the DPC, so it's done properly, tastefully, and in a way that creates this garden city by the sea. This is our key view, that this must be an area of greenery, it must be an area of development, but done sensitively. We want to put all parking underground. We want to see as few cars on the top as possible, a place where you and I will want to take our children to enjoy a new area in the city of Gibraltar.
You mentioned port waters 4 times in your statement on this reclamation. Is that significant to distinguish it from waters which Spain might contest are hers?
Well, I mentioned port waters, I mentioned in-harbour reclamation, I mentioned the Eastside reclamation as well, which is not in port waters and not in the harbour. I'm talking about where it is. I can't think of another way of describing it.
But Spain ceded the port waters under the Treaty of Utrecht. It claims that Gibraltar doesn't have territorial waters and therefore that the Eastside reclamation is illegal in its view.
Well, they have contested that the Eastside reclamation was in their view illegal, and they've lost in the European Commission. I don't know why it is that you're trying to draw me into this, but let's be very clear. This is inside the port and inside the harbour. I can't think of another way of describing it, whether it's an issue which you might say has sensitivity to or exposure to the Spanish claim or not. It's just where it is, and that's how I have to describe it.
So is it not significant that, in your view, I assume, this project would not be caught by the environmental part of the Gibraltar Brexit protocol?
Well, I would take the view that whatever the Spanish believed are their rights in respect of British Gibraltar territorial waters, if they sincerely thought that they had any chance of succeeding in their claims, they will go to the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. This is an issue of politics, not an issue of rights. The government of Gibraltar will develop as it considers appropriate. This government of Gibraltar has expanded the Eastside reclamation by almost a half and is starting to develop it, and we're now starting the Western Side reclamation. At the moment, we have absolutely no reclamations planned outside the in-harbour basin. That is just a simple reality.
And finally, Chief Minister, for somebody who has concerns about Gibraltar feeling like a building site, you've compared this project to the major reclamation at Westside in the late 1980s. What will be built at this reclamation?
So I think this reclamation creates a great opportunity to add to Gibraltar's commercial space. I think you can see some office developments in the area, and in particular to add to Gibraltar's residential space. Different types of residential. I think that there will be not some 50-50 properties there, but some affordable homes which are not government affordable homes. We see many Gibraltarians now moving from 50-50 homes to other types of development that are a little more exclusive, you might call them that. You might see some high-end residential as well, and you'll see many open spaces and a lot of greenery. And I think that's the right combination that we need for this particular area. So you've got Queensway Quay alongside, you've got Cormorant Wharf, you've got the area of King's Wharf. You look at those areas and you look at the population of those areas. Most of the people living in what we might have called high-class residential these days are Gibraltarians.
And you expect to build some of that, not affordable homes, but you expect to build, as the government, some homes that sell to that market?
No, I'm not expecting to build that. Remember, the government is getting a share for nothing of the development in exchange for putting up part of the land and keeping part of the land to do whatever we consider is appropriate. I'm not expecting to go into the business of building anything other than affordable homes as the government. And what we're building in respect of affordable homes are San Centenary terraces on the east side plot, and we're building 2 more residential facilities, the Bob Belisa Mews facility and the Europort facility. So we will have built more affordable homes than any government in the history of Gibraltar, at the same time as we're facilitating the building of other types of homes for developers in Gibraltar and trying to keep a share of that for the taxpayer, because that of course goes to what we have available to fund affordable housing. This is a complex picture. To try and slice it and say you're only doing one or doing the other doesn't do justice to the reality of what we're trying to do, which is to run an integrated economy for the benefit in particular of the hardworking men and women of the Gibraltar economy, who are the ones that the Gibraltar Socialist Party most represents.